Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. Today I have a special pre-recorded episode for you. It is actually my final project presentation for my advanced coaching certification in feminist coaching. So that process was just so eye-opening for me. I did it through Carol Lowenthal's feminist coaching organization. And I just knew that there were things that were affecting my clients in their dating journey that went deeper than just being on an app and swiping. There was just a lot of mindset drama. There were a lot of narratives and a lot of deep set shame and fears and concerns. And I took the certification program so that I could understand deeper if there were cultural factors that were impacting my clients' dating journeys. And yes, there were. So I am officially certified as a feminist coach. This is my third coaching certification. And I really think you will get a lot out of this presentation. I identified 8 thinking patterns that are sort of culturally accepted, but that can create a lot of pain in the dating journey. And so I titled that presentation, Why Dating Feels Terrible and What You Can Do About It. So here is the presentation. I hope you get a lot out of it. And thank you for your time and attention. Hello, and welcome to Why Dating Feels Terrible and What You Can Do About It. So this presentation is for women who are dating and who are experiencing a lot of negative emotions around the process of dating and finding a partner. My name is Shade Curry. I am a certified life coach. My first coaching certification was in trauma recovery, which I applied to working with women who were going through divorce or who had been divorced. I wanted to go through a growth and healing journey after their divorce. I then certified as a general life and weight loss coach with the Life Coach School. And I am currently certifying as an advanced feminist coach. So this presentation actually examines how sexism impacts women in the dating process. My clientele is typically women who are in monogamous and heterosexual relationships. So I came to the coaching field after my own divorce. So I got married really young. I was 21 years old. And at that time, getting married felt like the most important thing in the world. It felt like it was going to be the crowning achievement of my life and that everything in my life would be okay if I got married. I came from a very challenging childhood, dysfunctional family, divorce, violence, all the things. And the messaging that I got both from my culture and from my religion was that marriage was like the thing. Relationships were the thing. So my value was very much wrapped up in my relationships, both romantic relationships and my friendships. I dated people who were very toxic. And then married one of them. Overall, I was just an insecure, anxious, type A people pleaser who just really wanted to please people to get external validation. And I felt like if I could just earn the right amount of validation, everything would be fine. Fast forward 17 years, I got divorced. And through that process of really healing and recovering from that divorce, I came to coaching. And coaching has really, really impacted my thinking, impacted the way I see myself, the way I see the world. I fully embody the belief that I'm valuable and lovable just because I exist, which is like completely night and day from where I was. I choose to be in relationships because I want to be in them, not because I need them to survive or to be safe or to be secure. My dating process was really stress-free after my divorce. I met my now husband about 18 months after I started dating, and we have been happily married for 3 years. So let's jump right into why dating feels so terrible to women. So I really I have a full practice of about 18 one-on-one clients. about 15 to 16 of them are focused on dating after a divorce. So I've worked over the last 3 or 4 years with lots and lots of women who are dating. Like they are in the field on the front lines dating. And a lot of what they tell me is that this experience is just not great. They experience a lot of anxiety. They feel a lot of pressure, frustration with the process, frustration with the experiences that they have. They tend to feel a lot of insecurity, feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, despair around dating. And you would think that since humans are like into relationships, most humans want some relationship of some kind. Finding a mate is something that we have been doing for thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of years. Why is it fraught with so much suffering? You would think that we would know how to do this by now. Like we would have this down. We would have figured out how to make this okay and seamless, and we would have figured it out. But there are a lot of factors that make dating today in 2022, when I'm doing this recording, feel so terrible. So I have distilled it down, kind of like in this presentation. There might be other factors that come into play, but really I'm just going to narrow it down to these 3 items that I'm going to mention. That dating feels really tough for women specifically because of a combination of the way that we are socialized. And there is a lot of sexism, misogyny, a lot of like really, what would you like? Yeah. And I'll get into the details, but women are socialized and have internalized a lot of sexist bias, like thoughts and narratives that make us believe that we are less than, that our value is in places that it really isn't. And we have been given lots of thoughts that cause us to participate in dating in ways that are harmful to us, to think thoughts that create a lot of pain and a lot of internal suffering around dating. Now, there are a couple of other factors that I will touch on, but really won't go deeply into today. The second one that I just want to mention is that our brain's natural self-preservation mechanisms also come into play here. And I will mention how like your brain always wants to keep you safe. It's always trying to keep you alive. And when it thinks that your life and death is tied up in a particular situation like dating, some of those natural self-preservation mechanisms will kick in. Anxiety is one of those emotions that comes up when your brain thinks like there's danger. So if it thinks something dangerous is about to happen when you're dating, it's going to kick in with very painful emotions. And I'll explain that a little bit in this presentation. Number 3 also comes into play, but we're not going to touch on that today. So a lot of women do experience trauma just as part of their life experiences. And there are also ways that we interpret other experiences that we have that may or may not have been traumatic, but those interpretations can also create internal suffering around our relationships and suffering around dating specifically. So trauma is like a whole thing on its own. I will not be touching on that, but I did want to mention it so that as you listen, if you feel like, well, trauma comes into play in this one and I'm not dealing with that, I'm letting you know ahead of time that I'm not going to talk about trauma in this particular presentation. All right. Our focus today, like I said, is number 1, the sexist socialization of women. And what's happening here is that women are socialized, have been socialized for hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions of years, and continue to be socialized to believe that relationships If you love and resonate with the Dating After Divorce podcast and are ready to stop wasting time and find a partner who matches you now, then working with me is your next right move. It's time to intentionally create success in your romantic life the way you do in other areas of your life. Now is the time to open your heart and life to real love. When you work with me, I help you date regularly and consistently, and ultimately, you enter a healthy and committed relationship, partnership, or marriage. My Good Men Only dating process helps you gain clarity on who you're looking for, where to find your person, and you'll make real progress with meeting them. I help you attract the kind of man you want to build a life with. And you'll enjoy the dating process because you'll spend time with men whose company you actually enjoy instead of kissing 100 frogs. My coaching process includes setting up your dating profile, your online dating process, so that you level up the types of men you're meeting until you hit the right match. I work with you on offline dating, how to connect with men in the real world, evaluating correctly for compatibility on multiple levels, finding the right balance between remaining open but not getting attached too quickly, retraining your intuition so that you can trust yourself and your instincts, and finding out the truth about the people you're dating without becoming an FBI agent. And when you finally go exclusive, you'll know the questions and conversations you need to have so you won't spend what should be your romantic honeymoon season overthinking and wondering if you're missing something about him. Attracting a whole different kind of relationship than you've experienced before is truly possible and available for you. I have 3 levels of coaching programs available to choose from. So if you want to learn more about doing this deep dive dating work that creates healthy, loving relationships after divorce, take 2 minutes to schedule a consultation call with me at sadecurry.com/schedule-appointment. That's SADECurry.com/schedule-appointment. Or you can just tap on the link in the show notes to schedule that call. I'll talk to you soon. Generally, all of our relationships, whether it's a relationship with our children, relationships with our parents, relationships with our friends, relationships with our romantic partners, and our relationship status are the source of our human value. This message is propagated everywhere, and we are imbibing that message from the moment we come into this world and identify as women. That message is continually presented to us by our parents, by our peer group, by the media, television, magazines, books. Even the way history is written propagates the belief that women's value is in how we perform in our relationships. And that is the big overarching source of pain in romantic relationships. And this is because our human value always feels like a matter of life and death. Men are socialized differently than women, right? So if a man, and we won't go into that, but like if you take a look at the fact that men are often socialized, that their value is in building wealth or being successful at work or, climbing the ladder. So if a man likely will experience pain around his human value being tied to that. So if he's not successful, he might experience internal suffering. And if a woman is socialized that her worth and safety and security is attached to being in a successful, quote unquote, as defined by the culture or society, a successful romantic relationship, that her human value, that her worth, that the meaning of her life is attached to that, it's going to feel that succeeding, again, in quotes, succeeding in that area is going to feel like a matter of life and death. And that's just because human value is embedded in our psyche as being the reason why we get to stay alive. And I'll touch on that in just a little bit. But I want to give you one example from a client that I have worked with. And she would say she was like in her early 50s, and she had been in a long-term relationship, about a 23-year relationship, had broken up. She had taken the time to heal and was like, okay, I'm going to dive in and jump on a dating app. This is scary, but I'm going to do it. She got on a dating app and immediately had a lot of text responses. She had 20, 30, it might even have been 40 immediate text responses from men who were interested in speaking to her on the app. Now, you would think that this would be wonderful. Like, yay, I'm a catch. People are seeing me as a catch. The opposite happened. My client panicked because she couldn't reply to every single text in what she considered a timely manner, 24 to 48 hours. And as we coached on this, we uncovered that the panic came from her fear of incurring the men's displeasure at the delay. The thought of a man, and so many men, being displeased with her, disapproving of her because she didn't reply to them right away, caused her to freeze completely. She experienced a ton of overwhelming feelings because she was delaying her response. And that caused her to delay her response even longer. Now, if you are removed from this situation, you might say, wow, like that doesn't seem to make sense. This is because the part of her brain that was responding to that situation was not thinking rationally. It wasn't thinking, oh, well, these are just text responses and I'll get to them when I get to them. And it's fine. What kicked in was an automatic response from a very deeply human, ancient and human need to feel valuable and worthy. So if we rewind to caveman days and a very, very long time ago, as humans, we needed to be valuable to our tribe to be included with the tribe. We needed to contribute to the tribe. We needed to be pleasing to the people that we needed to band with so that we would have access to food, we would have protection from predators, we would be able to attract a mate for reproduction. And that response, that desire is not really a conscious desire. It's embedded really deeply in our psyche. So over thousands and thousands of years, this desire to be valuable to others in order to stay alive continues to be an automatic human instinct. Now, fast forward to today, when we sense that someone sees us as less than valuable, when we sense that someone is displeased with us, our brains automatically generate anxiety to warn us that we're in danger of being kicked out of the tribe. And that automatic response will compel us to do anything to raise our value in the eyes of our tribe. And what's interesting is that we don't need the tribe in that format anymore, because today food is abundant. We are mostly not actually in danger from predators in the wild. We don't really need a tribe to stay alive. Now, we might want a tribe, you might want a community, you might want friends, you might even want a mate, but we don't need one to stay alive. However, our brains, the lower brain, that part of our brain that adapted to survive caveman days, that survival instinct is still there. It's still impacting how we respond to situations today. So that instinct to be valuable in that sense is no longer needed. However, dating and romantic relationship situations continue to trigger that response. And that's because the messaging continues and continues to be propagated that our romantic relationships are a matter of life and death. And a lot of us women, I would say, most of us, I think it's almost safe to say that all of us in some way have internalized these sexist biases because they're just in the air that we breathe. Now, you might ask, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would we feel like be thinking that way? Because women have equal rights and like laws are changing and things are changing. So in contemporary society, like we talk about romantic love, it's a choice. We marry for love. We marry because we want to. And so it's presented as a choice that we pursue for personal fulfillment and that we have equal rights in the relationships and we have independence and equal opportunities for happiness in relationships. And that is what we want. That's where we're going. That's where we're working towards. However, as it stands today, romantic love is still tainted by internalized sexist narratives and biases, and they continue to be expressed in society and continue to be reinforced. And this doesn't mean that things aren't getting better. Things are getting way, way, way better. But it's really good to have an awareness that these biases still exist, not just in others like men pushing them on us, but we as women have actually internalized this, and we enforce them for ourselves, right? So these narratives have been passed down over hundreds of years. They're so subtle. We don't even question them. We respond to them automatically. And really what we're going to cover today is some of them. I really want to raise an awareness by showing you what they are and how they're showing up, and examples from my own clients' lives, so that you can see if you are being impacted by any of these sexist narratives, and you can start to say, oh, well, I don't want to think that way. I don't want to treat myself in that way, and start to make some of those changes. A quick example is just the fact that we are still socialized to make romantic love the most important goal. Like, it's still the number one goal in movies, on TV. The subtext there is that romantic love gives a woman's life meaning and worthiness, versus it's a personal choice that a woman could, take or leave, or be like, I want this or I don't want this. All right. So next, I'm going to just walk you very quickly through 8 sexist narratives that turn the process of dating into this very painful, high-stakes pursuit. And if you gain an awareness of these narratives, it can really take the pressure off your dating. It doesn't mean you shouldn't date or that you won't want to date. It just means that, the painful parts will be reduced. The suffering that is embedded, or that you anticipate with dating, will be greatly reduced, because you're like, oh, I don't have to believe that narrative, and I can just go out there and have fun and have an adventure. So let's go. Number 1, the historical narrative is that a woman's value lies in her usefulness to other people. So historically, in most cultures, women were just considered useful for domestic labor, childbearing, and child rearing. We were not considered sovereign individuals who had inherent value. I mean, in some cultures, it was pretty bad. We were like cattle. We were like property for men to be used, to be husbanded, right? Farmed for our value. Now, that narrative, the historical narrative, has been passed down and changed and massaged into a contemporary narrative that you hear in words like wife material, or a high value woman, or feminine energy, or in some religious traditions, the virtuous woman who does all these things and produces all these things for other people in these ways. You hear it embedded in discussions around family values and the value of the woman in the family, specifically being her usefulness for domestic labor, for homemaking, childbearing, child rearing. And the internal bias that this creates is that a woman is not a sovereign individual who has inherent value, whether or not she is useful for any of these things, right? And it causes women to feel responsible to prove that they're useful to a man when they're dating. You see it when a woman is over-functioning in a relationship, when she's over-giving, when she's abandoning her own wants and needs in order to do something or to prove her usefulness to her romantic partner. And the thinking, the belief there is, I'm not worthy of love unless I am giving to or helping others. So you can see where that narrative has morphed and shifted to still be embedded in romantic love. So when I work with my clients, I notice that the ones who have this belief, they often fear being abandoned if they don't prove their usefulness to a man. They have difficulty saying no or caring for their own needs when they're in a relationship. And the impact is they often will tolerate emotional neglect in their relationships. They will even break the man's boundaries in order to care for him. They'll get into his business in order to care for him. You hear the language of a woman losing herself in relationships. It's because of this kind of thinking. They will subsume their own wants and needs in order to meet the man's wants and needs. I'll often see some of my clients who believe this, choosing men who need fixing, men who need mothering, men who are projects in order to prove their own worthiness by helping him. And so a specific example is I had a client actually in the last month go to a social event and in hopes of meeting eligible men. And she met one gentleman, but within a few minutes of talking to him, she realized that he was just not right for her. Their health lifestyles were very different. He had some health habits that were just not going to be compatible with her lifestyle. But then she stayed talking to him because he was very interested in her. And so she continued to talk to him, even as she locked eyes with another guy across the room who looked way closer to what she was looking for, who appeared interested in her. What she said to me was that I didn't want to leave this guy to go over to talk to the other because I was afraid of hurting his feelings. Like she felt obligated and responsible for this man's feelings, and discarded her own needs, her own wants, her own desire to meet an eligible guy to meet this man's needs. I have another former client who continually took back her alcoholic boyfriend because she was afraid that if she wasn't there for him to pick him up when he was drunk, he would drive drunk and might hurt himself. So that's number one. And you can see how just this single narrative can have so many ripple effects on a woman's dating life. The feelings that this creates is like feelings of inadequacy. A lot of anxiety is produced by this thinking. All right, number two, women belong to men. Like if you say it that way today, people will be like, no, of course not. Of course, women don't belong to men. Historically, a woman's financial resources belonged to her father before she got married and were transferred to her husband when she got married. She couldn't transact financially without her husband's permission or without a man's permission. Now, we would never think today that like I belong to a man or women belong to men. However, the contemporary narrative and symbols of this thinking are still very evident. Women wear engagement rings, signaling that they belong to, they're spoken for, right? There are still dowries in many cultures today. The symbol of a father giving his daughter away to her husband, these are all symbols of ownership that still continue to trickle down into romantic relationships today. This creates an internal bias that we're not sovereign, that it's not okay for us to be autonomous or sovereign within ourselves and want a relationship, that we can't be both. Like we're either in a relationship and owned or belong to, needing permission, needing validation from our partners, or we're single and autonomous and sovereign, right? And the thinking creates this belief that disapproval from a partner must be avoided at all costs, that the men or your partner gets a say in your decisions when you're in a relationship. And it's impossible to be in a relationship without being controlled in some way. So this is sort of like the thinking that keeps women away from relationships when they desire one, because they don't think they can be sovereign within a relationship. They believe that relationships mean giving up autonomy. And often this comes with women not being able to say no, seeking approval of the men that they meet during the dating process, a lot of people pleasing, conflict avoidance, changing who they are to impress potential partners instead of authentically expressing who they are. I have a former client who came to me, and when we talked about kind of like where she was in her dating process, she told me this story about how she had changed her dating profile. So she had a hobby. She did like historical reenactments. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool hobby. And she was like, oh, well, but I took that down from my profile because I was talking to this guy and he said it was weird and I should take it down from my profile. And she did. Like, really? And it's just that automatic response that she ought to do things in a way that pleased men, even random men that she met on an app, just kicked in. And so without thinking, she changed her self-expression to please this person. All right, let's go to number 3. A woman's ultimate achievement is to be chosen by a partner. Now, historically, marriage, mating, partnership was a necessity for a woman's survival. It had very high stakes for women because in many cultures, they had little to no economic power. So the ultimate success achievement was to be desired by a man and to be chosen for marriage. And you see like some of these old words like spinster, old maid carry a negative connotation because the woman did not succeed in obtaining a partner. But you see the word bachelor simply means an unmarried man who has all his options open. So that implies that a man, like for a man, the marriage or partnership is a choice, whereas for a woman, it's a necessity, and a lack of success in that area is a bad thing. And the contemporary narrative that continues to perpetuate this is things like a woman's wedding is the most important day of her life. And you see little girls just dreaming about their wedding day. The belief that the greatest expression of happiness for a woman is found in romantic love. This is promoted in movies, in television, in families. The belief that partnership is essential for a woman's happiness. You see it in like some of the marriage narratives, like, oh, men need respect and women need love. Now, the internal bias the bias that we start to internalize is that when we're single, that means there's something wrong with us. That means that we're in danger, that something bad might happen to us, or something bad is happening when we're not in a romantic relationship, that we're unsuccessful, that we have failed in getting a man to desire and to choose us. We believe that our value then is being defined by this romantic relationship status. You start to see thinking where the woman believes that she's not acceptable or worthy of love, that finding a partner would prove that she's lovable or that she's worthy. And you see the impact when rejection by a partner feels like death to a woman, like it feels like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I see it in a lot of my clients where they will avoid situations where they might be rejected, even to the point that they will not engage with men that they like or who might be compatible with them, because being rejected by that man would feel really terrible with them. And so they tend to choose like maybe partners that are less suitable, but feel safer, or there would be a lower chance of being rejected by that person. And so then they stay in the cycle of not actually finding a partner because they don't engage with partners that are compatible and suitable for them. Another impact of this thinking is that a woman can become preoccupied with her relationship status, hyper-focused on being partnered, feeling incomplete or empty, or a lot of shame around being single, a lot of pressure to be successful at partnership. For someone like me who was married, but in a toxic relationship, it shows up in holding on to a toxic relationship. Like you see, like women who are in abusive relationships will stay in abusive relationships because the thought of being single and out there is so painful and is fraught with just so much shame. People will say things like, I should never divorce. Divorce is not an option. And so a woman will be hyper-focused on getting into a relationship and reluctant to leave a relationship that's not serving her. A couple of my clients who had this kind of thinking, one wanted to purchase a home. She was single, one was ready to purchase a home, had the resources to purchase a home, but was waiting to find a partner before doing so because that was the most important thing, and she just needed to put everything on hold until that happened. Or I had another client who was very accomplished and financially successful, but she was crippled with like self-loathing and shame, used the word loser for herself because she wasn't partnered in her early 30s. And worse, she needed to hire a coach to help her find a partner, because all the other people had found partners, all the other people, her friends, her family, found partners without needing a coach. And this just ruined her experience of her own life because she was single. And that was like the piece that gave meaning to everything else. All right, let's go to number 4. My family will suffer if I don't attract a mate. And today it shows up with this really subtle thought that being single is hurting the people who love me. So being single or divorced historically had implications, not just for the woman, but for her family. Like in certain cultures, if the oldest girl couldn't find a suitable match, it ruined her younger sister's ability and eligibility for marriage, right? Marriage was very transactional. So making a good match meant that your family could rise could climb the social ladder. Your parents, your father, and your brothers could have access to financial opportunities and business opportunities if you made the right match. The contemporary narrative is like, you see it with families like mothers who are like, what are you doing to me by not finding a mate? And sometimes it's couched in, well, I want you to give me grandchildren, or, nice statements like that. However, that pressure often comes from families viewing the single status of their daughters as being a reflection of their own success as parents. You see relatives and friends constantly asking about the relationship status or progress in the relationship. It also plays into divorces where there is a narrative that divorce in and of itself is harmful to children, putting pressure on women to stay in abusive relationships, even in relationships where the children are being abused, because children need their father and children need an intact family, and as though there was no way that a child could thrive outside of this perfect, weirdly defined definition of a family. And actually, statistics have shown that children thrive better when their parents are not in conflict. So divorce is actually a tool that can help children thrive if it removes the conflict that the children are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So the internal bias is that I can't belong with others. I can't belong in community unless I am partnered. And women tend to feel inadequate. They feel like a third wheel when they're around their friends who are partnered. They feel like they stick out like a sore thumb around partnered friends and family. And many, many single women or divorced women will withdraw from social settings. They just won't go to events because of the shame of being single or divorced, which actually makes it harder to meet a suitable partner. And I just wanted to give this example. It sort of touches on it. I have a client who is divorced now, but she talked about when she was getting married at about 20 or 21. She had broken up with her then boyfriend, who was an older man who had cheated on her and was treating her very badly. And her mother pressured her to return to the relationship. Her mother literally invited this man over to their home and insisted that she make up with him. And she eventually married him. And the marriage, of course, turned out to be really, really toxic and unhappy. And she eventually divorced him. Right. Number 5. A woman's body is a tool for attracting a mate. And that translates to today, the internal bias that my body must conform to beauty standards and be pleasing to others, men, for me to be loved. Remember, we all want to be loved. This is a deeply rooted human need to be loved or to be valued. So the historical narrative is that like women needed to attract a partner, like you needed to just get married. You needed to appear appealing to a man, be useful and pleasing for the male gaze, because a man had to say, yeah, you're desirable based on your fertility or your potential to be fertile and give him children, visual sex appeal, conformity to the cultural beauty standards. And you hear that thinking today in words like men are visual, right? Like men are visual, like you just have to accept that, like it's a fact, like it's some kind of scientific fact that men are visual and you need to look good for them to be attracted to you. Women internalize that as the need to adhere to whatever the cultural beauty norms are in that day in order to create a relationship, right? And that just makes how they treat their bodies also high stakes. So, the relationship is already high stakes, right? Now your body and how it looks also becomes high stakes, like compounds the pressure that women are experiencing around relationships. The thinking that we internalize is that our body must be pleasing to others or we can't be happy. Then there's also like thoughts like men are only attracted to women with large breasts or fair skin, long hair, big butts, or whatever the physical attribute that the woman herself might not have, but then believes that she needs in order to attract a mate. There's also the belief that if you haven't attracted a mate, somehow it's because you are not attractive, you are not adhering to whatever the beauty norm is. And then they embed the thought, I'm unattractive, I'm ugly, et cetera, et cetera. The woman's body then belongs to everyone but her. And she believes that its use is defined by other people. And so there's a running commentary, running dissatisfaction. Again, lots of negative emotions surrounding that belief about her own body, shame, anxiety, inadequacy, self-loathing. And actually have a current client who has what she considers very small breasts, like she uses the word non-existent. Outside of thinking about a romantic relationship, she's like, I'm fine with my breasts. Like, it breastfed my kids, everyone's fine and healthy. So when she thinks about her body and her breasts in terms of her utility for it, what she wanted to do with it, she's fine. But then the minute she thinks about a romantic partner seeing her breasts, she begins to panic. She's afraid of that moment of reveal and what the man is going to think about her breasts. And she had considered breast implants, but because of the potential side effects, she chose not to. And because she chose not to have breast implants, she became paralyzed in her dating journey because of the thought that one day a partner was going to have to see her breasts. All right, 5A. So this is related to previous thought about a woman's body being a tool to attract a mate. For women above the age of fertility, historically, they were neither useful nor desirable for marriage. Like, you couldn't have kids, you didn't look young, like, yeah, you're just not valuable, right? And I've seen this a lot, this narrative a lot with my divorce clients, many of whom divorced after very, very long-term relationships, 15, 20, even 25 years of marriage. They got divorced, wanting a new partner, but then believing that they have no value and they cannot be loved. You see this narrative in contemporary society, in depictions in media about the old crone, the old hag, the single spinster librarian, the cat lady, the words, oh, she's on the shelf, right? For divorced women, you hear words like damaged goods, like who would want me? I have baggage. So to just that thinking reflects that the woman's age and situation in life means that she does not have value and cannot be loved. Below that is the thinking that there's something wrong with me because of my age. There's something wrong with me because I'm single at this stage. There's something wrong with me because I'm divorced. I'm not marriageable by society standards, and so I don't have value. I hear women talking about the fact that their life is over, their best years are behind them. They feel irrelevant and invisible simply because of where they are in their age. They'll feel undesirable, afraid of dying alone. It expresses itself in this excessive investment and preoccupation in looking younger. Women fall prey to the diet industry, the beauty industry, the makeup tax, which is the idea that in order to look presentable, women must pay in extra time, money, and effort. Many women, because of this age factor, will withdraw from social life. They'll just withdraw from putting themselves out there, from dating, from enjoying adventures because of the anticipated rejection that they believe will come with their age. All right, number 6, also related to 5, but separated just because this has to do with a woman's sexuality. Now, the historical narrative was that women's bodies belonged to the man, like they were sexual objects, they were property, right? So their sexuality belonged to their fathers, who were expected or who desired to keep them chaste, keep them virgins, keep them pure, so that they would keep their value that the father could then exchange for this transaction with a future husband, with another family. So a woman's value was then attached to her chastity, her virginity, her purity. She could be shamed and rejected and punished for failing a virginity test. Desirability was attached to like that concept of being pure, right? Like that concept of not having any sexual inappropriate as defined by society and men inappropriate sexual activity. And this actually carried dire consequences in many cultures. You read about the woman in the Bible who was going to be stoned because she was caught in adultery. Like, this was very, very common. Like, the sexual expression of a woman what did not belong to her. She could not express it based on her desires. It had to be expressed as she was told to express it by the men in her life and by society. The contemporary narrative is everywhere today. Women continue to be portrayed as sexual objects in movies, in music, in entertainment, in the cultural language, in like, it's everywhere. Toxic workplaces, toxic relationships, being blamed for sending the wrong message to people, being described as frigid or cold. And what we internalize is that we are sexual objects who exist to fulfill a man's sexual desire, right? We believe that our sexuality then is a tool that it needs to be used to obtain love. Like, it needs to be like used as we're told that it needs to be used in order for us to be valued and loved, that we don't own our own sexuality. It implies that women don't experience pleasure, shouldn't experience pleasure, or cannot experience pleasure. However, it's interesting to see that a man's sexual expression is considered normal, unavoidable, not in their control. It's just the way they are, right? The impact that I've seen working with women is that often they will have sex when they don't want to, right? Or they will worry that either having sex when they're dating or not having sex will hurt their ability to find love. So it's sort of like this catch-22. I have a client that, asked, well, so when should I have sex with the man? Because if I don't, he's going to lose interest and walk away, right? Implying that there were external rules that she needed to abide by in order to keep a man's interest. On the other hand, she also had the thought that if she didn't have sex along the way while she was, that if she then had sex with the man, so if she didn't have sex, then they would lose interest and go away. But then if she did, they would think that she was a slut and that she was sleeping with everyone she dated, and they would leave. So it was like that catch-22 thinking that keeps women paralyzed in the process of dating. Women then think that they need to put their sexuality on hold until a partner says it's okay. Or they believe that if they do have sex with a partner, it's an indication that he loves them and wants a relationship with them. I also see it with some of my clients who are single, who have sexual desires, want sex, but then are unable to permit themselves to take charge of their own pleasure and of their own sexual expression. They are unable to decide how they want to express their sexuality or even take steps to express it in the way that they desire. Number 6B, attached to sexuality, is that a man is entitled to a woman's loyalty and exclusivity, but not vice versa, because that's not natural. That's not the way men are. And I mentioned this as a slight difference to 6A because marriage historically was also a tool that men used to ensure that the woman who was bearing their children wasn't also bearing children for other men. Like, so that all the children that they were taking care of with their resources belonged to that man. So it was okay for a man to be promiscuous, but it was not okay for a woman to be promiscuous. So you see it in the contemporary narrative where there are multiple words for a woman who expresses her sexuality in a way that's considered promiscuous. So hoe, whore, slut, the wanton woman. And when you look at these words, the words themselves define who the woman is, right? Like, who she inherently is a slut. However, you see words used to describe promiscuous men are almost cool, like Casanova, Don Juan. It's almost like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? It's almost desirable for a man to be that way. Or you see words like player or womanizer that reference what the man is doing, not who he inherently is. Now, a very recent exception is the word fuckboy that was coined around 2004. So extremely recently, that does imply that the man himself, that's who he inherently is. Traditionally, people have accepted the belief that men should sow their wild oats before settling down, that boys will be boys, that men are commitment phobes, but women should commit immediately in relationships. And this bias, I see it in my clients when they feel like it's wrong for them to date multiple people. They feel the need to prove their loyalty or their ability to be faithful, even when they've just met a man, right? It's like, I have to prove to him that I can be faithful, that I can be loyal. And so they have difficulty dating casually. They feel pressure to focus all of their energy on one man at a time. They feel like they're cheating if they're not focused on the one man. They feel pressure to go exclusive with a man before they're ready. And they self-abandon their own dating process when a man expresses interest. I have a client who was told by a man that when he said, oh yeah, let's focus on each other, let's go exclusive. And she was like, no, I still want to see some other people. And he was like, that's just wrong. Like, it was like a moral failure on her part for not wanting to go exclusive with him after just 2 weeks. What was challenging with my client is that she actually agreed and went exclusive with him, only to break up with him a month later. So she sort of abandoned her own process and her own desires at that moment because a man said she needed to prove her loyalty to him. All right. Number 7, we're almost there. Women are inferior. Women are weak-minded. Women are less capable than men. Historically, women were just treated like wards of their husbands. They were treated like children. They needed to obey. They needed to do what they were told. They were assumed to be immature, inferior, needing guidance. They were hysterical. They didn't know their own mind. And the contemporary narrative that you hear is like, women are not logical or analytical. They're bad at math. They're bad at money. They're too sensitive, too emotional, too picky, right? They need to be innocent and pure, like they're fragile and in need of protection. Like when you see these messages in the media or these messages implied in society today, it really creates this damsel in distress sort of thinking or attitude. And women then believe that a relationship will save them from their problems, that they need a man's guidance and strength to thrive. And they start to believe that they can't be trusted with their own life. Like, they don't trust themselves. Like they're doing it wrong. I see it a lot in the thinking that I'm doing it wrong, whether it's dating or whatever, or they think the man knows better. Like he knows better. And I will see women actually take dating advice from men that they are dating. Like, how? What's happening here? The impact in the dating process is women then tend to be susceptible to gaslighting. They will second guess themselves. There's a lot of analysis paralysis when making romantic relationship decisions. They often approach dating with this naive attitude, this childlikeness. They will believe whatever men say without doing their own evaluations on or engaging with their own experience about what's happening when they're dating. Some women will overshare details of their life and their history, hoping for acceptance and unconditional love. They will indulge in romantic fantasies about being saved or rescued by a partner. A couple of examples was a client who we would, sort of do like a download on her dates. And she would tell me, oh, he's this and he's that. He's really kind. He's very humble. And I was like, well, you went on one date. How do you know he's humble, right? And it was because, well, he said he was very humble. I'm like, like you have to observe and make your own decision about whether or not he's humble. So she found it hard to question anything the man said about himself. She found it hard to make her own observations or her own evaluations. I also have another client, successfully partnered now, but initially was always intimidated by men who were smart and intellectual. And she would come to our calls describing how they were brilliant and well-traveled and well-read. And I remember on one of the calls, I was like, so how many countries has this man been to? And she named off a few countries that he'd been to. And I was like, how many countries have you been to? And she had been to many countries. She was very well traveled herself. She was very well read. And it had never occurred to her that she was this man's intellectual equal, like factually his intellectual equal. Like just she slid automatically into that attitude of, oh, he's so great and he's so wonderful. And it comes from this automatic thinking that women are inferior. All right. And the final one, autonomous, sovereign, independent women will be punished. And were they punished? Historically, independent, unsubmissive, difficult women were dubbed shrews, witches, incurred violence, abuse, and even death, right? Like if a woman elicited a man's pleasure or did not comply with the role that was assigned to her by society, there were definitely dire consequences. The witches were burned at the stake. Saying no was defined as aggressive, ill-tempered. You hear the word nag being used for a woman who challenges the status quo in a relationship. And the contemporary narrative is just talking about how women are difficult or intimidating to men. Successful women are emasculating to men, and the woman needs to be feminine and make the man feel needed. The belief, you will be surprised at how many women believe that the fact that they are successful financially or highly accomplished automatically means that they will have trouble finding a relationship or have trouble being in a relationship. There is the narrative that successful women should learn how to be more feminine when relating to men in their intimate relationships and to tone it down. And then women then internalize this belief that it's dangerous if they're non-compliant. Like you just have to be compliant and pleasing to others, especially the men in your life, or that their achievements have no meaning if they're not in a relationship. That they must never rock the boat, that they're responsible for how a man feels around them, that it's their job to make a man feel good or feel like a man when in relationship with them. That if a man experiences a negative emotion, they won't succeed at relationships. I hear this a lot with my clients who work overtime to not be mean, or non-judgmental. I don't want to judge. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to judge. I don't want to hurt his feelings. And they walk on eggshells around men. They will express themselves in ways that are inauthentic to who they are because they're trying to control how that man feels around them. A lot of people pleasing, a lot of conflict avoidance, an excessive fear of being seen as selfish or independent. And what is interesting about this is that this leads very successful, highly accomplished women to being abused and controlled by a partner because they are unable to express themselves how they express themselves in the world, which is like logically and making decisions that are good for them. They become incapable of making those kinds of decisions within a relationship, and then they're susceptible to being gaslit, abused, and controlled. So I have a personal example on this one that illustrates this is on one of my very early dates after my divorce, a man kissed me without my consent. And I was like, yeah, I don't want that to happen again. I did not like it. So I just created my own process where I would let a man that I decided to go to on a first date with, let him know ahead of time that I would prefer not to be kissed on the first date. And I remember, and most men were okay with it, very respectful. But this gentleman was like just shocked and upset and very highly disturbed by the fact that I communicated this to him. And so we spent the first date with him really asking how I dared to say this. And like, is this how you treat all the men that you meet? And this is why you're single. And so that thinking has just come from like the fact that I dared to say that I had my own ideas of how I wanted to be treated in a relationship was not okay. So these are just some of the historical narratives that are still being propagated that have been internalized by women and men and our family members, and that are impacting women's experiences when they're dating. When we believe these thoughts and when we respond from these subconscious narratives, dating feels really, really hard. It's really, really hard to just go out there and have an adventure when you have to like walk on eggshells, when you have to overthink, when you have to like think about how the man feels and how to make sure you don't do anything wrong, and all of these things that we've talked about today. And so the fix for this is really to become aware of when you are responding to a dating situation from these subconscious biases. And so I'm just going to walk us really quickly through a tool that can help with this. I call it the non-judgmental thought awareness and investigation tool. It's really coaching. It's really coaching yourself on your own thoughts or getting coaching from a coach on your own thoughts. It's really important to examine this internalized sexism because it actually frees you to choose a relationship that's suitable to you. When we want to distance ourselves from looking at this thinking, it causes us to fear romantic relationships because we know these things are there and we think they're dangerous. And when we don't look at them and deal with them, it makes it hard for us to engage in the romantic relationship. It makes it hard for us to trust that we can keep ourselves safe and we will have a successful result. But if you look at it, then you can decide, okay, I'm not going to abide by that societal pressure. I'm not going to abide by that external standard. I've looked at it. I don't like it. I'm going to live by something else. Or it could free you to happily choose singlehood or another relationship structure without shame and anxiety because you've looked at what's coming from you and you've looked at what's coming from a historical sexist narrative, and then you can decide for yourself. So I found that when my clients are aware of how they've internalized these biases, they are able to be more expressive of their authentic selves because they know where the thinking is coming from, and they're able to choose to respond to the thinking or not, instead of this automatic anxiety, automatic feeling of inadequacy that compels them to act in ways that are painful or to feel a lot of painful emotions. So a quick rundown of a quick way to coach yourself. If you're starting to feel pain in a dating situation, like if you're like, this isn't going well, I just feel this is really hard, or this part of it is really painful, you can just really run through this tool to see if internalized sexism is impacting your dating. The first step is to become aware of what you're thinking and feeling, and then identify if that thinking and feeling is rooted in a sexist narrative. Release judgment, because I noticed that a lot of my clients will beat themselves up for having that thinking. Why do I think this way? I shouldn't think this way. This is terrible. I'm hurting myself. No, it's in the air that you breathe. It's been passed down for thousands of years. It was inevitable that we were going to think this way. It was inevitable that we were going to be in this moment in time where we have to address this thinking. And then you can start to question the thoughts like, okay, this is what I'm thinking because of how I've been socialized. Is it true? Is it a thought that I want to keep? Is it a thought that I want to change? And then you can decide on your own truth and choose a different truth for yourself. So to put this into practice, I'm going to run through a quick example that a quick coaching session that I went through with a client that sort of fit into this, and you can kind of see how this could apply to you. So let's put it into practice. In this example, my client was struggling to let go. She was struggling to decide when to tell a man, hey, we're not a good match. And, I don't want to see you again, basically. And she realized that she was doing it really quickly. She felt a lot of pressure to cut off even men that she was still on the fence about after 2 or 3 dates. And when we did a thought download of what she was thinking and feeling, she was like, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I find it hard. And I find it hard to say that we're a match. I want to tell them on the phone. So she was just really overthinking the process of evaluating a guy. and deciding whether or not to let him go. Well, that was the surface problem. The underlying challenge that she was having was rooted in the sexist narrative that she needed to make sure she didn't hurt these men. So the word she used was, I don't want to hurt these men, but really, she didn't want to displease them. She didn't want to do anything that could elicit negative emotion from a man. Now, when you think about it, that's a valid fear. There have been so many stories of women rejecting a man, saying no, and incurring violence and incurring abuse because they dared to say no to a man. And so even though my client didn't necessarily use that word, that narrative that it's dangerous to say no to a man was in the air, was in her subconscious, and it made the moment where she wanted to tell a man no very difficult for her. And so she was trying to do it really quickly so that it was early enough that she didn't incur any displeasure or any disappointment or anger from the man. Now, words that you can use to release judgment at a moment like this, right? Because she was very frustrated with herself for finding it hard or for struggling with this. So if you kind of walk through those steps, you can just say, oh, my brain is just trying to keep me safe. Of course. The narrative is that it's dangerous for a woman to reject a man, to say no. And so my brain is just trying to keep me safe from that possible anger. These thoughts and feelings are not a problem, right? My brain and my socialization make it inevitable that I'm going to struggle with something like this. And this is so human of me, which is a phrase that I learned from my feminist coach instructor, Cara Lowenthal. This is just human. My socialization as a woman plus my brain's desire to keep me safe have come together to make me feel super anxious about saying no to a guy. And then the next step is to question, right? And so when we walk through this session, my client and I was like, are you actually hurting a man when you decide not to see him anymore? Does it hurt a man that you're not exclusive with if you decide to not see him after 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks? Right. And so we questioned the automatic thinking that she was experiencing. What is it about saying we're not a match that's hard? Why does it feel painful to say no, thank you? What if he's angry and disappointed? Right? Is it true that you cannot handle disappointment or anger in a man that you have decided not to date? So we just explored everything that she was thinking and everything that she was believing about this. And then finally, we walked through how she wanted to believe, the thinking that served her, letting go of the underlying automatic fear and anxiety that this was like a really dangerous situation, and helping her choose that, the thought that it was okay for her to be on her own timeline when she said no to a man, and choosing the belief that she could handle whatever the man's response was. Choosing the belief that she was not responsible for how the man felt or his journey to finding his own mate, and that she was only responsible for her own thoughts, feelings, and actions in the dating process. So there is a worksheet that will be attached to this video that you can use to walk yourself through your own thinking if you start to experience a very painful dating situation that's connected to sexist narratives that you have internalized and that you are using against yourself. All right. That is the presentation. This is why dating feels painful. It's because when we internalize all of these beliefs, they just show up automatically and our brain fires so rapidly that we don't realize that we are the ones doing this to ourselves at this point because of the way we've been socialized. Now, if you would love some additional help getting coached around dating, getting coached around divorce, or exploring other internal biases around other areas of your life or in your money, in your career, I want to invite you to reach out to me, Shadi Curry, on my website, shadicurry.com, for dating coaching or divorce coaching. and to explore more feminist principles that can really, really make a difference in your life, I invite you to explore feminist life coaching with Cara Lowenthal at unfuckyourbrain.com and just explore all of the areas where you might be using internal biases against yourself in your life. So I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. And I will see you next time.